team of specialists in workplace mental health field, but we also have long periods of working in health and social care, mental health services, drug and alcohol services, domestic violence services, with people who are in recovery from mental health problems. So we have a lot of experience frontline, but over the past 5 years, we've brought all of our qualifications, understanding into the workplace, and actually began to design our own evidence-based programs specifically around culture change. We've tested these out into all industries, and they really work, to the point where we have some of the biggest clients that anyone could ever dream of having in the UK and globally over the past couple of years. So really proud of the team and the work that we've achieved since we set up in 2018. So our programs are targeted at all levels. So this means that we have a range of programs, training and consultancy that is bespoke to all levels, from CEO to frontline staff. This is because we need to make education, skills, behaviours accessible to everyone. So our vision is very simple: creating mentally healthy workplaces that thrive. This means that they'll have a positive impact on businesses, the people and humans within the business, and out into the local communities. Tracy's just come on my screen there. Well done, Tracy, for finding the annotate. Excellent. Lindsay, which one of you are going to do a little bit of an introduction?
I'll introduce if that's all right.
Oh, lovely, thank you.
Good morning, folks. So I'm one of the Lindsays. You'll find that having two Lindsays is actually probably a benefit, because you get both of us answering most of the time. So Lindsay and I are co-founders of 50/50 Future. We're a diversity and inclusion training and consultancy organisation, and everything that we do is about really value and difference. So our mission at 50/50 is to really be a catalyst for inclusion by demystifying diversity and providing solutions that break down barriers. So much like Emily and the team at Our Minds Work, everything that we do is bespoke to the clients that we work with due to the nature of work that we undertake. One thing that I always like to address or mention is the elephant in the room. So Lindsay and I are very aware that we are two white females, founders of a diversity company, and we definitely don't profess to know or understand all of the challenges faced by everybody. Diversity and inclusion in itself is such a hefty topic that it definitely requires continuous learning and challenging. What we do always hope to do is share our experiences and knowledge and focus really on that inclusion piece. So with that in mind, our teachings and learnings are transferable across the whole diversity spectrum, and they really take into account the importance of intersectionality and all of those multifaceted layers that make us all individual and unique. Everything that we do is underpinned by our own methodology at 50/50. So our 7 steps to better balance. We'll come on to that a little bit later on and explore that in more detail for you, to give you an idea of what that involves. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, so let's get going. What are you here for? So why are we here today? We're going to give you a little bit of information basically around why the two organisations have come together and collaborated on this event. We're going to run a little bit of a poll for you just to get an idea of why you're actually here as well, and talk a little bit around that. Lindsay, would you like to start off with us with diversity inclusion?
Yes, perfect. So diversity and inclusion plays a huge part in wellbeing and mental health. So as humans, we really want to feel part of the in-group, and we want to feel like we belong and that we're valued and we can be our authentic selves. So inclusion is all about individuals being treated fairly and respectfully, having those equal opportunities and access to resources so they really can contribute fully to an organisation's success. Now, that's easier for some individuals more than others, so we really need to be conscious of the barriers and challenges others may be facing, so we can learn how to support really and make everyone feel as if they can be themselves in the workplace without fear of stigma or discrimination.
Excellent, thank you. And we also have seen an increase in poor mental health being reported. We all have mental health. It doesn't matter the colour of your skin, the age, if you have autism, it literally, if you are a human being, we all have mental health. Some days it's good, some days it's not so good. Some of us have mental health problems and illnesses. Others can feel mentally unwell without an actual diagnosis of a mental health condition. So if one thing that unites us is that we're all going to experience at some point in our lives poor mental health, and they can be triggered by lots of different things, but what we're here to do today is to try and make sure that we're uniting diversity and inclusion specifically around mental health, so that people do feel included around the conversation as we raise awareness around mental health, as we help to educate people, and as we actually try to tackle stigma in the workplace. We also have a legal obligation on both sides when it comes to diversity and inclusion in mental health. Lindsay, do you want to give us a little bit of information from your side on this one?
Yeah, if it's okay, can I just add a bit onto the mental health side of things as well, because we have got some quite recent examples from the past year where I think it's really come into the fore for us. So I think first of all, when we think about invisible versus visible identity traits, this is something that crops up quite a lot, where it can be, people can be really affected with their mental health, because these invisible traits can be things like, if you are LGBT+, you may have dual heritage, you could be neurodiverse, so ADHD, autism, you may have an invisible disability, including mental health conditions, or even by association. So even if you have a family member, someone who you're close to. So people who have these concealable identities, they really need to weigh up the risks and benefits of whether they can disclose who they really are to people around them. So in the workplace, you can imagine how uncomfortable that might be for certain people. And they really need to feel safe to be able to do that, to be their authentic selves. And the amount of weight on their cognitive activity every day of whether they conceal or reveal this identity can lead to isolation, anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem as well. So that's one part of it. But then if we also consider intersectionality, so this is where we each have different layers of ourselves that make us who we are. So gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, age, education, all of these layers or identities interconnect with each other and mean that we can experience both privilege and discrimination in different ways. So if we think about what's happened over the past year, and for some individuals, the events over the past year and how that may have caused them to have extra anxiety and depression. If we think about people of colour, so the events around George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, there's been a lot of movement and I think probably racial trauma for a lot of people around that over the past year, where it's brought up past memories. They are then being overwhelmed from peers being asked to explain things or what their experience is, and where the education piece falls on them where it shouldn't do. So I think they experience a whole extra layer of cognitive weight around those issues. And then just as another example as well, we have a lot of anti-Chinese prejudice now because of COVID. And so people who are from Chinese heritage are experiencing more hate crimes and more localized racism. So they're getting spat at, verbally abused, humiliated with jokes. They're being avoided and shunned at work because of it, and even physical abuse. So if we think about what they are going through, where their children are getting picked on at school, their elderly parents are getting coughed at and spat at in public. And when they go out in public, actually, even the witnesses don't seem to be sympathetic and aren't supporting them. So there's a lot of extra anxiety and fear, and people being diagnosed with depression because they're dealing with all of this burden. And that's just a tiny little window into it. So if we just think about that for a moment, and carrying all that around on top of what we would normally carry around day to day, it makes a huge impact on a person. So this intersectionality really amplifies pressure on an individual. So we really need to give them more support in workplaces, because it does bear heavily on their mental health. So just wanted to really give you some examples of how that can show up, and especially, you know, over the events of the past year. In terms of legal obligations, I'll hand back over to Linz, because she loves this one. I won't steal that off you, Linz.
I think just despite the legislation that's in place, the likes of the Equalities Act, I mean, we're still seeing mass unemployment, wage inequality, recruitment discrimination, bullying, harassment, and all of that has a massive impact on everybody involved and creates those toxic work cultures. So I think events like this hopefully are really great, because it's getting everybody on the same page and providing a space to really talk about it so that we can be actionable off the back. But I'll not go on too much, Emily.
No, thank you. And, you know, legal obligations for us with regards to mental health is actually a huge topic in the workplace, generally because a lot of workplaces aren't actually legally compliant when it comes to one of the biggest causes of poor mental health triggered by the workplace, which is work-related stress, anxiety and depression. That kind of leads us into leadership and management as well. When we see poor leadership and management, poor communication, or, you know, overbearing workloads, timescales, too much responsibility, not enough resources to do them, this is actually a huge trigger for anyone in the workplace to create a psychological injury. And when it comes to HSC legislation, the majority of workplaces in the UK are not legally compliant with doing stress risk assessments to prevent work-related stress. Another part of the legal obligation that a lot of people in workplaces, especially managers, sometimes tend to struggle with is the idea under the Equality Act that somebody can decide themselves that they meet the definition for disability without actually having a diagnosis. So we have a lot of conversations when it comes to legal obligations in the workplace, because, like we say, it can be quite confusing for people at first until you have that conversation. Or, like I say, a lot of companies aren't actually legally compliant with some of the legislation that is actually there to protect people's mental health and well-being. Moving into leadership and manager responsibility, like I've said, poor leadership and management can be a trigger for psychological injuries and causes of poor mental health in the workplace. But what that also means is that positive leadership, good management and responsibility that is taken ownership of to take action to create a mentally healthy workplace can also be the #1 cause of good, healthy workplaces to work in. And the diversity inclusion element has to fall underneath that. Is there anything that you want to add to leadership and manager responsibility there, Lindsay?
I think it's probably, you know, obviously quite similar to what you've just said, but I think for us it's really about, and I think it's the same with mental health and well-being as well, that leadership have to invest in it authentically. So it's not seen as this fluffy nice to have. It's, you know, it really is business critical, and it has to be aligned with the company values and embedded as part of the culture. So, and they need to be role modeling that through the business as well. So yeah, I think it's probably the same.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes that's one of the hardest things to help people to do, is to change their attitudes towards these topics that we're talking about today, and help to educate people in a different way of supporting and leading a business. So yeah, definitely. So we do have a little bit of a poll. We'd like to know, why are you here? So I've just launched the poll there. It should just pop up on your screen. It is a multiple choice and it is anonymous, so we're not going to see what you're selecting. But why are you here today? Are you here because you want to look at how to incorporate your D&I into your mental health or wellbeing strategy? Maybe you're already facing D&I related problems that you need to tackle now. Maybe you want to do it the other way. You want to incorporate mental health into your D&I strategy. Are you looking for training on either of these topics? maybe you're facing mental health related problems that you need to tackle now. You know, work related stress is definitely one that has been on the increase very, very recently, to the point where, we have the highest levels of sickness absence due to work related stress, anxiety and depression. Looking for informed policies and procedures, something else, say what in the chat box, or maybe if you're just not sure, hopefully by the end of today's session, you'll have a little bit more of an idea on what that might look like. So just one more person left to vote. Brilliant. Let me just share this results with you. So 73% how to incorporate the strategies together. So, you know, brilliant. Exactly why we're here today, to help to get some guidance around that. So yeah, incorporating. So some of you have a mental health, don't necessarily have a mental health strategy, but you have a diversity and inclusion strategy. So you want to add that way. Not so many people looking for training, a little bit on policies and procedures, and looks like we might have something in the chat box there. Disability confident leader level 3, excellent. So looking for information around building out your disability confident qualification there. Excellent. So it looks like hopefully today is going to help to cover some of your expectations and what you would like to leave here with. So the way we talk about workplaces at Our Minds Work is we look at the workplace as an ecosystem, with mental health being the big umbrella for a thriving ecosystem. So we have a little bit of an ecosystem here. Yes, it's not the British ecosystem, but a very lovely ecosystem anyway. Let's just all pretend that we're there and we're experiencing that lovely warmth instead of the rain and snow we've had over the past couple of days. So when we understand an ecosystem, we want it to thrive. It is at its best when it's able to function at its best. So when we look at different parts of the ecosystem, they all have their own special role, but their roles all fit together in a special way so that they contribute to the survival of other parts. So if you think about the sunlight, without the sun, we are doomed. Yeah, we know that we are all part and parcel of that sunlight survival. Without it, we wouldn't be able to survive. This is the same in the workplace. There are things in the workplace that create survival for everything else, like a positive working culture, like including diversity and inclusion, like a mental health strategy, like the way your managers and leaders actually support their team, how we manage work-related stress, relationships, dynamics, transformational change. All of this plays a huge part in having a thriving ecosystem. So we also know that our ecosystem is fragile to change. We know that poor communication, change that's happening in the workplace can be a big trigger for work-related stress, anxiety and depression for people. So when we are creating change, like implementing a mental health strategy, like implementing diversity and inclusion, this is transformational change. This is change of the culture within your workplace. There are right ways to do these things. There are safe ways to do them. And hopefully throughout today, you'll get a better understanding of what we actually mean by there are ways to do this in the right way. Especially for us at Our Minds Work, safety first, always. Being a healthcare professional for over 20 years, you work to the values and the beliefs of first do no harm. So when we think about changing the culture in the workplace, you know, we need to build trust, we need to reduce stigma, we need to educate people, we need to make sure that there are safety nets in place to protect people as we're beginning to lift the lid and help people to, and you know, in what Lindsay said, being their authentic self and actually sharing their experiences safely in the workplace. So keep this in mind. Think about your workplace as an ecosystem, and then this will make a little bit more sense on actually how we can use the eco model to create change. So we're going to use our eco model today to help you to better understand how we can safely create change. Obviously, E there, starting us off, means evaluate. when we can evaluate where we are and assess where we are as an organisation, it also helps us to recognise where we can improve. We can also evaluate our own mental health. So I will be showing you a tool on how you can self-evaluate your mental health, but this can also be used as a tool to evaluate company-wide states of mind when it comes to mental health evaluation. We then have collaborate. So this is from health and social care, collaborative care. When we work together and wrap around services and support for somebody who's in recovery from mental health, it creates better outcomes for recovery. But again, when we create and change, we have to do it together. We have to work together and collaborate on change so that we have better outcomes for driving that transformational change forward. And the last one in there is ownership. If we're going to collaborate, we all have to be able to be empowered and encouraged to take ownership of our own actions for change, whether this is actions for looking after our own mental health and engaging with the services that are there to support recovery, or as a manager and leader, and being empowered to take ownership of the change that we are actually responsible for and to lead forward. So we are going to use this eco model. Just to start us off, I'm going to hand over to Lindsay, who's going to go through the 7 steps to better balance. Then I'm going to talk through a little bit about our mental health culture change progression model. So this should give you a way to start to evaluate where you are as an organisation to help you to look at what are your next steps.
Great, thank you. So me and Lindsay are going to bunny hop through these ones and tag in for each one, so that hopefully you get a bit of a change in accent while we go through. Now this framework, our 7 steps to better balance, is the one that Lindsay had mentioned at the start. So this is what this whole holistic approach underpins all of our training and consultancy. So what we sometimes see in organisations is that they will point to things like recruitment as being their biggest challenge, and it usually is. It's a beast of a topic in itself. But having this holistic framework then helps organisations join everything up across the business. So rather than just focusing on recruitment, it then joins it into things like first impressions, culture and your onboarding, progression opportunities and so forth. And what we really wanted to do is to help give you some tools to begin inclusion into your processes and policies in your business, but making sure it's right across the board. So we're just going to go through and give you a few ideas on each of the 7 steps to give you a bit more information of the kind of things you can be thinking about for each one. So if we start off with first impressions. So this is obviously a really important one that I think a lot of people forget about after a while, because you're just used to seeing your own company website, you're used to just putting out the same marketing materials. But this is potentially, especially if you have a concealable identity or if you're part of an underrepresented group, these first impressions are potentially going to be a deal breaker as to whether or not they think it's safe to work in your organisation and feel comfortable even applying to be part of your organisation. So thinking of things like dress codes at work, are they excluding anyone in any way? The language and tone of voice that you use in your website copy, your marketing materials, and what images are you using as part of that? What are your marketing materials saying? What are they putting out there? Do they have a warm, welcoming feel to them, or are they corporate speak? And how are people addressing each other in your business? Are you using pronouns? Are you making it acceptable for people to come in and use their pronouns, or is it something that's not quite there yet? A lot of people tend to look at who's at the top of the business and who's getting promoted to see whether that's something that they feel as though fits in with their future plans. And they'll also really be having a look at your values and looking at your strategic objectives and policies. And also, is the company investing in anything? And more importantly, is it authentic? Does it feel authentic that they're doing that? So just a couple of pointers to start you off, and I'll hand you over to Linz.
Cool. So when we're looking at the leadership side of things, A few things maybe that we want to bear in mind would be the likes of, are we rewarding inclusive behaviours through the likes of appraisals processes, our talent management strategy, and is the pay and reward process one that kind of has mitigated any bias in it as well. We want to make sure that we're asking the right questions, that we're leading by example, that we're striving for that psychological safety throughout our teams, where we have got positive attitudes, there's support and commitment there for learning, that we're really promoting that healthy work-life balance, and we're making use of flexible hours or smart working where possible. A really nice thing for leadership to be able to do is to formalise time allocation for the likes of affinity groups. So I know that Jamie's put in the chat there that you've launched the organisation's first LGBTQI+ network. Having that on top of your day-to-day job can sometimes be a real workload. So actually having leadership say, you know what, it's really important and it should be part of your day-to-day. So don't go above and beyond and put yourself under undue stress to do that too. There's a lot of things that we can pull in to leadership, like baking inclusion into our systems, policies and processes, but there's just a few things to get you going, and I'll bat back Lynn's for culture.
Yeah, cool. I think we're just going to try and keep this as
concise
as we possibly can today, which we're not very good at, but we will try. So yeah, in terms of culture, I think one of the main things is, does your leadership and management, do they know how to make it psychologically safe for people? Do they understand what that is and what that means? And also in terms of team building, thinking about, you know, obviously we're probably going to be doing a bit of a hybrid soon of face-to-face team building and some remote still, but whatever you're doing as part of your activities, are you making sure that everybody can take part in at least something? So I think people get stressed out thinking, well, there's not going to be one thing that everybody wants to do. And I don't think that's what you need to be doing, but just making sure that there's a variety of things. That means that people can join in, and it's just not about going to the pub on a Friday or having beers, or, you know, something that's one thing on repeat that not everyone can attend. I think having open communication and a cohesive mindset. So within your company culture, making sure that everybody is on the same page, they have the same approach when it comes to diversity and inclusion, mental health and well-being, and they know how to be a good ally. And just really, as part of that, knowing what language to use, because language does matter. So again, I'll leave it at that and hand back to you for recruitment, Lynn.
So as Elvie mentioned, recruitment tends to be a big topic for us, and a lot of clients would approach us with concerns that their talent pool isn't necessarily diverse, or they're struggling to get that real diversity and inclusion piece right. Recruitment, it's huge. I think starting at the very beginning, we can think of things like how to make our job adverts more inclusive, what we put on there, how they're laid out, even right the way through the whole process. So looking at any reasonable adjustments that we need to make, making that really easy for applicants to understand, and being very bold and clear with regards to your policies, what you stand for, pulling in information such as your D&I policies and your mental health strategies, so that people are really aware of them, and it's obvious, right the way through to how we ask our questions, making sure we have diverse panels, onboarding processes. Recruitment's a beast. But there's a lot there that we can really pick apart so that everyone feels as if they could belong at that organisation, but also throughout the process, we make it really easy, or as easy as we can, for individuals to disclose information about themselves from the outset. Sometimes that can be quite uncomfortable, and they don't necessarily feel safe to do that. So making sure that we can really make it seamless and put a lot of thought behind it to pull in D&I to that talent management strategy. Retention.
Yes, off the back of that, retention. So we've previously mentioned today that weight on cognitive activity, where if anybody is suppressing their identity, that can lead to isolation, anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. So when somebody is experiencing those things, that can then in turn lead to social avoidance. And that social avoidance can be completely misconstrued and line managers may hold that against an individual where it actually impacts their performance, and that can then generate a higher turnover if they are if their performance is impacted, and if you're going to get a higher turnover of staff. Whereas if employees feel comfortable to disclose and they can reveal their true identity, they can achieve increased authenticity, improved well-being, and higher job satisfaction. And obviously when you have higher job satisfaction, they're less likely to go somewhere else. So I think that's a really important part of retention. And then reputation.
All about being authentic. So what are your employees saying about you? What do your customers and stakeholders say about you? How are you investing? For what reasons are you taking these topics on board seriously? And if you're virtue signaling here, there's going to be a distinct lack of, or a real limited understanding of inclusion and well-being throughout the whole organisation. It's going to fall short. So it's really about having that authentic commitment, making sure it runs through companies' values and the cultural DNA of your organisations. And that in turn is going to enhance your reputation as an employer of choice, which again leads back to higher retention, more diversity, easier recruitment processes, cultures. You can see how they're all linking together here. And then finally, just touching on progression, Linz.
Yeah, so progression is obviously a huge part of a person's worth and feeling valued in moving through the company. And a lot of times we know that underrepresented groups don't get the opportunity to progress within a company. And I think a big part of what we were talking about before, and that social avoidance, can play into this. So if that is impacting on your evaluation from your line managers, they might assume that you're just not engaged. So making sure that line managers' approach to inclusion is well informed. And I think a lot of people on both sides of this, so on the mental health side and the D&I side, they have a fear of saying the wrong thing and not really understanding it. So if they have the right education, then we can have more informed conversations with the right approach. There should be specific training on that so that they feel confident to do that, and opportunities like reverse mentorship so that they know how to be supportive. They can have training to reduce bias, and they can look at that with their talent management procedures as well. And I think it's also really important for line managers to be looking at their data. So who in the organisation is progressing and who isn't, and why not, and what story does that data tell? And I will leave it there. So I think we've covered all of those steps. So hopefully it's given you a little bit of an idea of the kind of things that you can look at in each area of the 7 steps, but also how they all intrinsically link together as well. So why that holistic approach is necessary. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you. Really interesting, and I think it evidences a number of benefits for creating a mentally healthy workplace, that thriving ecosystem. So you will see, you know, those improvements on retention, reputation, recruitment will become easier. You're creating a better first impression. Your culture is of healthy, mentally healthy. So then we can start to see how that all really fits in, which really leads us nicely into the mental health culture change model that Our Minds Work have designed. So this is a way of helping you to evaluate where your culture is at when it comes to mental health in the workplace. So you can see across the top, we have specific stages from at risk. You know, this really is a toxic workplace culture. This is a culture that is actually creating psychological injuries. It's not a healthy place to work. And you're going to see poor reputation, high turnover of staff, people unhappy, lower levels of productivity. So you are going to see all of those impacts, which we were just talking about there on the last model. So as we can see, we then move on to on track, mentally healthy and inspiring culture. When it comes to inspiring culture, this is where you're going to see all of the benefits that really relate back to what Lindsay were just talking us through there. The benefits of creating a mentally healthy workplace where it's actually embedded, it's part of your daily practice, it's a common language, a common framework, everybody's using the same tools and information and guidance when it comes to working with people with mental ill health, creating psychologically safe workplaces, And obviously diversity inclusion all fits into this, under this umbrella as well. Sorry. I'm not going to go into too much detail with this because there is a lot here, and I am going to send this to you, and I know that Lindsay are going to follow up with their tool as well to provide this to you for free from this session today. But I just want to point out a couple of things that generally get talked about a lot when it comes to mental health in the workplace. Is where do you start? We have seen over the past 5 years that a lot of workplaces have actually started at the bottom, and I don't mean monitoring and embedding, I mean employee awareness. But this can probably be one of the most dangerous places to start, because how have we created a psychological safe workplace to begin to reduce stigma and raise awareness around mental health problems in the workplace? When we reduce stigma and raise awareness with employees, they then feel more comfortable coming forward and asking for help. And if you haven't put in place all of the preceding kind of safety nets, you're going to actually create a bigger problem, especially if it's to do with work-related triggers for mental ill health. You don't have the right policies and procedures in to support somebody. There are negative attitudes still by managers, so managers are unable to treat somebody in the right way. So it can create a whole host of kind of risks by starting bottom up. We always start at the top down, and this is about creating these safety nets so that when we do get to actually delivering the training for managers, all the policies and procedures are in place. There's professional support that we can refer people onto. There is very, very clear direction and language and tools that have been embedded into HR systems, health and safety systems, so that you can then begin to train them out through managers and employees. Management of prevention of work-related stress is a massive topic, and it generally falls under health and safety legislation. But like I said, people really don't even know what the legislation is, never mind actually implement this. And this isn't just doing stress risk assessments by occupational health when somebody's gone off sick and it says work-related stress. This is actually about preventing it, doing regular audits, regular check-ins with staff. So perfect example there of what Lindsay was using was the word fear. When people are frightened of saying the wrong thing, of doing the wrong thing, inaction happens. People won't do anything at all. So we have to make sure that as we go down this progression model, that we give people the right information, the right knowledge and the right training specifically for their roles. So HR and leadership will look very, very different to your front level kind of team leader level of managers. So we need to make sure that it's targeted so that at varying levels, you've got a targeted approach to the skills, knowledge and tools that those different layers of managers need to have. Mental health first aid has already been mentioned in the box, and if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, people will know how I feel about mental health first aid, and this is reflected in our progression model here. So when we get to peer-to-peer support, as you can see, it's quite far down. It's not the first thing that we recommend is done, because as you can see here, when we've got mental health first aid trained employees provided with limited monitoring, no additional support, no safeguarding policies and procedures in place, it puts not only the company at risk, but the mental health first aiders at risk, and the people, their peers, who they're expected to provide support, crisis management, safeguarding, protection, all of these things that actually a 2-day training course does not cover. So the infrastructure, the support, understanding of the policies and procedures, onboarding into the role, a safe recruitment process must be in place before we actually put these people into this type of training. You know, this is a huge problem in the workplace right now, and unfortunately it does create a big risk. So as you can see, when it comes to peer-to-peer support with type of mental health first aid, advocate, ambassadors, champions, whatever they're called, there is a right way to actually do this. Mental health first aid training isn't manager training either, and what we have seen is that a lot of companies have just said everybody gets mental health first aid training, and it completely omits the skills and knowledge and tools that is very, very different for a manager when it comes to just general kind of literacy and education around mental health, signs and symptoms of mental health problems, but also, you know, supporting somebody through a crisis. We then get down into employee awareness, and you know, this really is how we unite all of these areas and sections and stages together. It should all work together once we get to employee awareness. So we're leading campaigns, we're raising awareness, we're reducing stigma, but you now have a safe peer-to-peer support service that can be referred to. Your managers have had the right level of training to support somebody who has a mental health problem or experiencing mental illness. There is a lot of work to do around stress prevention, so people know how to tackle this. There's strategies, there's policies, there's procedures, there's places to provide signposting to once you get to that stage. So I am going to send this over to you, so because it is in a lot of detail, but as you can see, what we're saying here is this is a way to create your strategy, but it also gives you an idea of what your action plan should look like when it comes to mental health. Your diversity and inclusion will fit into there, and it can be a golden thread, bringing the two strategies quite closely together. We've covered a lot there. I'm just wondering if there are any kind of questions from the two models that we've just shown you there. Leslie, right, thank you, very helpful. Di, do you think stress risk assessments can sometimes focus too much on the work environments when it's often multiple elements and then can mask some of the personal support that is needed? I'm working on some analysis at the moment, so keen on people's thoughts. Definitely, I mean, this stress risk assessment is specifically for work-related stress because that is the legal obligation. We can provide supportive measures for people who are going through difficult challenges, kind of targeted by what's going on externally for them. And I think this is the quality of your manager training and the skills, is that your managers understand this. They understand that there's a legal obligation when it comes to work-related stress, and that's what your kind of stress risk assessment will help to identify in your stress audits. But the quality of your manager training means that they can then open that conversation up a little bit further to, you know, what else is going on. Because when we look at stress in the workplace, or stress anywhere, you know, we generally see a building of triggers rather than just kind of one-off events. And, you know, we're talking about well-being here. Well-being is a well-being. It means you're a whole person, and those stresses and pressures can come from both the workplace and from our home, which means that we have less ability, less resources to actually manage those building stresses. And then they go on for too long, and then obviously they create psychological injuries. So definitely, without a doubt, your stress risk assessment approach is specifically for work-related stress. And the key to this is you prevent it. What's your company-wide stress risk assessment that should be in place, should be implemented, and regular audits being done to actually prevent work-related stress happening in the first place. And then as we go through that, you're then looking at an individual. So then what is this individual's experience? And stresses will be very, very different for all of us. Some people in the room today might feel extremely stressed when being stuck in traffic and running late. Other people may feel like it's just a bit of annoyance, but can kind of cope and manage with it quite well. So, you know, it's going to be different. We've got to get down to the individual level when it comes to supporting people, but on an organizational wide, it's prevention of work-related stress that the legal obligation is there to do. That was a little bit more than Leslie's quick response of yes. Sorry about that. I hope I answered your question there. But as you can see, it's a massive topic. It's a big piece of work. Okay, lovely. Let's move on. That's helped us to get a little bit of an evaluation going. We're now going to move on to evaluation when it comes to mental health, stigma and discrimination. I do have a little bit of a poll here for you. Actually, I've got a poll from what we've just done there. Let me just quickly launch this poll. Which areas on the progression model do you think you need to focus on next? It is a multiple choice question, but you might have been looking at that going, oh God, we do nothing around the management and prevention of work-related stress. Oh God, we've got mental health first aiders in place, but nobody's monitoring them. Nobody knows if they're being safe. No, we don't have a safeguarding policy and procedure in place. You know, where are you at? What is it that you particularly think after today? This is probably where I need to look at next. So just a few more people to vote. We do have clear kind of lead there so far, which is good. Just a few more seconds. Okay, that's everybody. Let me just quickly share the results for you and we can move on. So 50% embed what we already have. So that's great to see that a lot of you in here today have a lot of initiatives in place that just need to move into this embedding area and become an inspiring culture. We've got 40% saying get legally compliant. Okay, definitely good place to start. Management and leadership training, brilliant, and 40% get peer-to-peer initiatives right. That's probably one of the frightening ones for me, that there are peer-to-peer initiatives already in place and they're not right, they're not safe. They're not monitored and people aren't getting the right level of support. So really good to see that you're at varying stages here, but it looks like we're quite far on. The majority of us are quite far on with embedding, but there are still some really key areas like work-related stress and legislation and peer-to-peer support initiatives in place that probably do need to be looked at quite imminently if you're looking at those areas specifically. Okay, so the next poll is with regards to stigma and discrimination, just to show you how kind of mental health and diversity and inclusion actually can be, you know, quite comprehensive and quite complex when we start to look at it. And sometimes, you know, stigma and discrimination can come from places where we maybe never even thought they would come from. So here is another poll. This is, oh, hold on, relaunch poll. This is true or false. Being gay, lesbian or bisexual was a mental health condition in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, until 1967. True or false? People with autism have the lowest risk of suicide. Question number 3, women attempt suicide more often than men. And question number 4, detention rates under the Mental Health Act recorded during 2012 were 2.2 times higher for people of African origin. Thanks, Leslie. So just a couple of questions, true or false, pretty kind of think on your feet with this one. We just have 2 more people left to vote. 1 more person left to vote and then I will share the results. Okay, I'm just going to share the results just because I just want to move on in time for this. So question number 1, being gay, lesbian or bisexual was a mental health condition in the DSM until 1967. This is actually false. It was until 1987, so much, much later than what you all initially felt there. And if we start to look at the stigma and discrimination that people of LGBTQ plus have experienced over the past, gosh, you know, decades for us, you know, who are similar age to me, we've seen the changes and the movement that they've had to go through. A lot of that has come from being told that you were mentally ill if you fit under this banner. And transgender as well has very, very recently been removed from the DSM as well as a mental illness. Number 2, people with autism have the lowest risk of suicide. So well done to the 89% who said it was false. people with autism are actually have the highest risk of suicide. And when we start to look at people with autism, they tend to have a range of other mental health problems like anxiety, depression. They may find it harder to find friends and connect with people. They may be more at risk of abuse and bullying. So when we start to look at, I think you looked at it, spoke about it earlier, about this intersectionality and how they all start to fit together. People with autism can be any colour, any sexuality, any age, any gender. So we actually see this play out when it comes to the risk of suicide. Women attempt suicide more often than men. So well done to the two people that said true. So again, this is a massive myth that people don't actually realize, that when it comes to gender and suicide, what we do have is that the highest rates of death by suicide are by men. So when we look at suicide in the UK, there's around about 6,000 suicides, thereabouts every year, and 3/4 of them will be male. However, of those 6,000 suicides, we can actually times that by 20 for attempted suicide. So for every one death by suicide, there's around about another 20 attempts. The majority of attempted suicides are actually by women. This then leads to stigmas around, well, women don't mean it, it's just a cry for help, because they're attempting it, but they're not actually completing suicide. And this is a massive myth as well, that all men just need to talk more about their mental health, and that's why they're killing themselves more often, when actually this isn't the case. When it comes to death by suicide, it is at a much higher rate for men because of the means that men will use rather than what women will use. They tend to be quicker, more violent, and leave no opportunity for an intervention to happen at that stage. And the last one there, detention rates under the Mental Health Act recorded during 2012 were 2.2 times higher for people of African origin. Absolutely well done to everybody that said that was true. And when you start to delve a little bit deeper into cultures and mental health, you know, there is a massive amount of stigma, and generally because of a lack of education. So my husband is from Zimbabwe. All of his family, my in-laws, still live over there, and we talk about this on quite a regular basis, because their level of mental health support is really only there when it comes to suicide, crisis, psychosis, really serious mental illness, because there hasn't been the levels of support there earlier on due to a lack of mental health services in the country. I think there's only something like 6 psychiatric units across the whole country. There aren't many psychiatrists, so it looks very, very different when we look at the services, but also the level of education and knowledge and understanding of actually mental health on its continuum. So these all elements become quite complex in themselves when you look at mental health on its own, but then what we're adding these additional layers when it comes to diversity and inclusion, neurodiversity, you know, age, gender, and also race as well. So I'm just going to stop sharing that, and just for time, we've got 15 minutes. So I'm going to really chop this down. Lindsay, I hope that you're okay with this. I am going to kind of speed us through the next kind of couple of sections so that we can get to the support element to make sure people have what they need. So this is where you get to use your annotate. I'm going to do a little bit of an example, an activity to show you how stigma and discrimination can actually begin to happen. So I'm going to hold up a couple of cards. All I want you to do is use your annotate. All you need to do is collect a stamp and put a stamp anywhere on these two arrows between mentally well and mentally unwell of where you think the card fits. So I'm going to put the first one up there, schizophrenia. Schizophrenia. So just to be clear, because a lot of people think that schizophrenia is multiple personality disorder. It's not multiple personality disorder. Schizophrenia means a split, but split from reality. So one of the most serious mental health problems that people can experience. Some of the symptoms are related to psychosis, hearing voices, distorted beliefs. Where do you think it goes? So we've got 2 there so far. We've got 1 more added. So please feel free to pop your stars on there. It looks so far out of 5 people, we don't really have a common language or a common assessment of this one. I'm just seeing something pop in there. Oh, Leslie, you should see 3 little dots that says more. Find it in there.
Jamie, it's just at the top, you'll have a bar that says your view and Emily Pearson's screen, and you might have a view options beside it.
Yeah.
And if you click that and scroll down, you'll see the word annotate, and it'll pull up a separate toolbar.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. So schizophrenia, I'll just give you a few more seconds just to get that one in. So we've gone in the middle, but we've also gone up the mentally unwell side as well. So feel free to just continue to do that one for another second. I'm going to put another one in here. Anxious. Choose a different stamp. Where do you think anxious goes? Oh, we've got a couple in the middle there. Pages in the middle. Val's gone a little bit further down towards mentally well. Okie doke. In the middle for Di. Okay, let's do one more. Happy. Where does happy go? Where does happy go? In the middle, a little bit further towards mentally well. We're all over with this one. Everybody's got a very varying opinion on here. Yeah. Okay. Couple of questions. Does somebody who have schizophrenia, are they unable to feel happy ever? If you are feeling anxious, is this because it's a normal reaction to doing a presentation, going for a job interview? Can somebody with psychosis experience happiness? Can somebody who has schizophrenia ever feel mentally well? So what we've done here is I've given you 3 words, and what you've all done is you've made a judgment on those words. And hopefully I'm going to have a look in the chat box and there might be a little bit of an explanation. Yeah, they can be anywhere on the diagram, and it all depends on the individual. If we were speaking to the person who had schizophrenia and we asked them, you know, how are you feeling today? Are you managing your condition? And they said, yeah, I engage in this treatment, that treatment, I have therapy, I'm living a healthy lifestyle, I'm able to feel pretty kind of mentally well. It doesn't mean that the condition has gone. It just means that they're able to manage it. But what can happen is for people who have no education or understanding around mental health, people see psychosis and schizophrenia as you are mentally ill all of the time, and all of the stereotypes that kind of language can bring can really impact people's ability to find support and access support. So when we're thinking about stigma, we're thinking about judgments, we're discriminating against people because of our views, generally down to a lack of education around this. So this is why we need to kind of raise the bar when it comes to education and understanding of what mental health actually means, but also adding into that your diversity and inclusion conversations as well. So hopefully that's just been helpful. We will get to questions on the end, so I am just going to kind of click through this because I don't want us to be running late. And we can actually evaluate our own mental health using what we call a mental health continuum model. So kind of similar what I've just said there, you know, people when they're mentally unwell in the orange and red section here, it's not about what is their condition and what is their label, it's about what's the severity of the symptoms that's impacting your ability to function normally. And this could be anyone on here, any point in time, any day, any month, any year, and it can begin to move. I will send you out this model so that you can have a better understanding of it. But this is a way that we can actually evaluate our own mental health. This is actually a common framework and tool that a whole organisation can work to. So when we implement our culture change framework, it's about everybody's using the same evaluation tools. Everyone's had the same education. Everyone's using the same supportive documents. It becomes a common language that can then be embedded, which can help people to find talking about mental health more accessible. So when you might have seen a mental health continuum model before, but we specifically designed this with to make it more accessible for people who found it harder to explain very profound emotions when they were struggling with their mental health. Once it's being explained, we can then just ask a colour, you know, where is your mental health today? I'm in the orange section. I will then know what that means to be in that orange section. Then I can have a conversation with that person, loved one, colleague, to say, okay, you know, what is it that we can do to help in a workplace, but also what can you do to look after your own mental health as well. This takes us into kind of collaboration. So the third part of the continuum model is, how do we collaborate together? We have to be able to take ownership for our own mental health. Obviously, it's one of the most important things that we should be thinking about taking care of, but also in the workplace, we do have a legal obligation to collaborate to make sure that we're preventing work-related stress, we're providing support for people with mental health problems. And now we know the reasons why we started top to bottom is that we have lots more places that we can actually refer somebody to when that professional support is in place. So the collaboration section of the mental health continuum model is, how do you actually work together to create collaborative care with wraparound services to get better outcomes for recovery, people back into that green section. And I am going to move us on. So taking ownership. This one is over to Lindsay to take us through their top tips of taking ownership.
Great, thanks. I will try and be as fast as I can through these ones. So for us, just a few things for you to consider yourself and take away from today and just reflect upon. So the first thing would be to challenge. And by that, firstly, challenge the norm. So the norm is usually male, it's usually white. We assume gender is binary. Sexual and marital relations between people are of the opposite sex. All of these things have become our norm, and we know that the world just doesn't work like that. So making sure that we are challenging those assumptions, but also challenging our own assumptions that we are making. So when we are stereotyping people, just checking in with ourselves and being more conscious of when we do this with certain individuals and certain groups. Obviously, training like unconscious bias will help us to overcome this and, you know, help us understand how that shows up, why it shows up, and just gives us some strategies to help combat it. In the meantime, if anybody hasn't done it already, you can take the implicit association tests, which there's some controversy around them. I think a good tool to use just to start the conversation around bias, but definitely don't take them as golden. I think they shouldn't be used in isolation and should be used as part of effective training as well. But definitely challenging ourselves, our assumptions and the norm. Moving on to actively listening. So just really making sure that we are consciously reaching out to other people from different groups to what we know about, to understand their experiences, what their challenges and barriers are, and more importantly, how we can support them. So maybe that's joining some groups and joining some webinars, and it's quite powerful sometimes being the minority in the room if we're not used to that. So just putting yourself in that uncomfortable position for a while and really making sure that you do get to hear from other people what it is that they need support with and how you can do that. It's also a really great idea to carry out some listening groups with colleagues at work. So if that's not something that you've already done, I think, you know, it's great if you are signing up to different campaigns and initiatives, but actually it's your colleagues who are going to give you their specific issues and challenges, and they may be specific to your workplace. So we need to hear from them. What are their issues? How will we tackle them? And some impartial facilitation might help them to speak more freely around some of those. In terms of our policies and procedures, I think after this past year and a bit now of the pandemic, I think now is actually a really good time to start refreshing some of those and just re-looking at them again and seeing what we can do differently. What else can we incorporate in there to make them more inclusive and accessible? So looking at things around flexible working, shared parental leave, what can you put in place to be more supportive to your colleagues, and thinking about what steps do you have in place where they can report incidents, and what channels do you use for them to give feedback and report issues and concerns. I think zero tolerance policies are something that people should be reminded of quite regularly. And I know that the research carried out, the anti-Chinese prejudice information I was giving you before, one of the things that made a huge impact on those individuals in the workplace was when the organisation made a big, bold statement about zero tolerance policies. So making sure that people know what they are and who they apply to, how and when do they access those. Are all of your policies visible and accessible, or do they have to hunt through intranets, or do they have to ask for them from HR? Just making sure that everybody can get to them easily, and that they use vibrant, warm and friendly language and not that corporate spiel. We want people to feel as though they understand them, that they're part of your brand, and more importantly for you as well, they're actually a shop window. So making sure that if you do have inclusive policies, that you're putting them on your website for those first impressions, and obviously for the rest of your colleagues to know how they can be supported. And yes, Leslie, absolutely easy to read too. So plain English is a must. Moving on to effective communication, making sure that you're using company-wide comms to ensure that everybody is part of the conversation on both sides of this. So for mental health and wellbeing and D&I, what are the company's aims and objectives? Do they know what they are? Is it authentic? And do they care personally about it? Because I think, as we're all probably in agreement, it is everybody's responsibility. So making sure that you can keep everybody up to date with progress towards the goals that you've set and the objectives that you've set, keeps it on the radar, it stays on the agenda more importantly, and also it's an opportunity to be really transparent with people in the organisation. And then finally, as a very quick point, your values must be aligned. So I think we have a front stage where this is what you're presenting outside to the world, and we must make sure that that is aligned with backstage, because there's a lot of virtue signalling that can happen, and we just need to really make sure that everything that we're presenting externally feeds through internally from the core and from your values. So just making sure that management are involved in making sure that happens as well. So I'll leave it at that and pass back to you, Emily. Thank you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so just the last kind of couple of slides really. I'm not going to talk through this, but one thing to make sure that you're thinking about is, how do you actually support workers living with mental health problems? We do provide training to managers on how to actually do this with the skills, but you can also think about putting in place what we have is a Stay Well at Work support plan, and our Mind have like a similar thing which is called a wellness action plan, so that it's a collaborative approach, and we're all sat at the same side of the table when it comes to supporting workers living with mental health problems. Just moving us on now, because we do have the last couple of slides, just to make sure that you leave here understanding that there is some support out there. So Lindsay, do you want to just talk through a little bit around what the support you can offer everybody?
Yeah, perfect. So I think it's just really to communicate that there's no silver bullet when it comes to any of these issues. So at 50/50, we work in partnership with you really to improve that organizational performance in a way that aligns to your vision, your mission, and your values. So it's important for us to really have D&I agenda owned at the top and then led from the bottom to create that meaningful change. You've seen how we take a holistic approach with our 7 steps to better balance framework, and we'll provide that to all of you after the session today, so you can have a better understanding of potentially some areas of focus for yourselves. And then you can see there that we provide a number of different consultancy services and training, everything from doing that audit piece with you right the way through to effective communication and conscious bias training. But we'll send you, rather than speaking more about it today, we'll send you through more information post session, so you've got our contact details there as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Lindsay. And just a final one on what we can do to help. So we help you to create a mentally healthy workplace. And we do this through a number of services that we provide to help you to work through that progression culture change model. So obviously we provide consultancy to make sure that you're getting the right policies and procedures in place when it comes to mental health and work-related stress, and they're embedded into change. And we also have varying levels of workplace mental health leadership training. So we do have 2 options. We have apprenticeship levy funded apprenticeships, and we also have commercial offerings. So we do have a level 4 and level 7 diploma in workplace mental health leadership. It is a 12-month apprenticeship program, and it's aimed at transformational leadership and senior people professionals, senior leaders. So this is about how do you actually lead that culture change model that we've showed you by giving you all the skills and knowledge and tools on actually leading transformational change and driving that forward. Our level 3 and level 5 certificate in preventing workplace stress and supporting mental health is aimed at your level 3 team leaders and your level 5 operations and department managers. They can be either provided through apprenticeship levy, which are more comprehensive programs, or we can do this as a 1 or 2 day course, focusing only on the mental health side and leadership, rather than the full apprenticeship, which can be paid commercially, and it's a 1 or 2 day level 3 or 5 certificate. We do have the level 3 mental health advocate blueprint and membership support. So if you are looking at getting your peer-to-peer support initiatives right, this is the full blueprint, support, training, monitoring, ongoing development, ongoing support available to make sure that you have a healthy, safe, functioning, monitored and reviewed service that's providing that peer-to-peer initiative for people. We then also have loads of mental health awareness topics for employee level, and we do have a workplace stress audit program. So if you are looking specifically at targeting work-related stress that's causing an issue in a particular team or department, or even the wider workplace, we would come in and do a solution-focused stress audit to help you to evaluate, collaborate, and help people to take ownership for actions for a stress-free workplace that can cause mental health problems. We currently deliver everything virtually and online at the moment as well, so it makes it accessible to any of your parts of business that might not even be in the UK, and we do actually deliver this globally and make sure that we tailor any global delivery to local legislations. I will send out some more information. So there is a great question in here, and I think Jamie's right. There probably isn't much time to talk about it, and it's probably worth